it's time for the history video. So, Krolastan started, well, it's the first country on the server, started around, like, the 5th of August 2022. And then, on the 7th of August, just 2 days later over here, the raiders just showed up. And the raiders obviously built a bunker. So Krolastan didn't actually start here, they started a lot further in that direction. It would take forever to try and find that, so I'm not going to even bother. So not really too much happened with them. They did steal money from the raiders, so the raiders, with some help from me obviously, like around here, piled up tons of TNT and threatened that if he didn't give back the money, they'd light the TNT. And you weren't allowed to declare war on anyone at that time because the server had just started its first countries. So my cousin, who was the one that led it, got the money back, and then we all left the server. Then not too much happens. They do some invading because over here, when Jesterland was formed by Kreteslo, he then got invaded by them because they didn't like Kreteslo. So they invaded him, and since you weren't allowed to invade people at the time, despite the fact that my cousin did, but he didn't invade them, he threatened him. So he invaded him and they both lost. I still remember being like around here and they were just pushing in and like I'm just fighting them. These trees weren't here, they were planted. I mean, there was definitely more trees around here, but Krolastan got to them first. So Kyle and his friend, so Kyle and his one-man army, pushed into there, failed miserably, so they left after making military tree, which is still around. And back to the raiders, they continued expanding, and then they eventually got a border here on them. So I built a tank. Since there's no wall there, fired a few fire charges, and this whole area used to be filled with trees. You can tell by stuff like this, that, and that. And then that attack from me, I lit all those trees on fire with the fire charges, and eventually accidentally lit his friend's house on fire. And almost Kyle's house. A wee bit of fire caught Kyle's house, but yeah. So, no invasion from the raiders because the raiders didn't have some plans to do in here, which doesn't go too well. Still called the grenade test. Some commands, put them together, get an XP ball that spawns crystals, do that, and then it creates a massive crater. And over here, tons of stuff happens. My country's eventually created, then a civil war happens, basically, and I just take all of them over. And then I eventually take over something Kyle didn't want taken over, military tree, because he never actually owned it. He built it, said that he owned it, but never actually put it inside of his territory. So therefore, when I took it, he protested a lot against it, and like a month or two later, he eventually got it back. Eventually. So he got back the tree in a land purchase after I purchased that land, so he purchased that land. Because his border used to be kind of like that, so he bought it so it'd be like that to there. But it didn't really matter because by the time he'd bought it, in those fire charge incidents, I had lit the tree on fire. So basically he just built or bought a plane of concrete. So after that, he declared war on me. He says it was a mini war, and then proceeded to create the largest war in the service history at the time. So then tons of stuff happens. So he pushes me back at here, and I didn't like that, so I pushed him back, and eventually a few of my troops got into the capital. He made a door here during the war. This door was built during the war, and he decided to do that. And once he did that, nothing went well because I just kind of flowed through here with my troops. I also got some of my troops and blew this hole in the wall here. Shut up, Enderman. You teleport through the ground. Anyways, so I blew that through. My troops flowed through. They also flowed through here at the same time. We eventually captured his friend's house. Like, tons of stuff was happening at that point. Then eventually, he started pushing me back. So he got me out of his capital, well out of it, actually. He pushed me back here, but fighting continued at this crater. During the war, a few of my troops went down there. After getting caught in the water, they just flowed down, and those troops were never seen again. And it goes through the crater as well, so there's even a chance of them being alive. They're probably still down there. So eventually, Krolastan decided the war was taking way too long, so let's just bomb them. They made a massive bombing here. Then on this bridge here, this little ridge or bridge or whatever, I spawned tons of troops, and Krolastan were trying their best to get over it. Although that was happening, I started pushing them back tiny bits here before they had enough of that and pushed me back all the way over the crater. Over here, I was also being pushed back. They pushed me back here, and then eventually the border came from here up and along to here, and then this border was fine, and then along like this. Then not too much happened with Krolastan for a while. Then over in my castle, all of this happening was my country invading them or they invading me, whatever way around you want it to go. And because of that loss, I went to do several simulations of how a war would go again between me and him. I and every single one I got pushed way back to my capital. To the point that in one of my towns over there, it's in the tour that I did, I had to literally spawn a wither because of how powerful he was, and even then still lost. So yeah, there's not much chance of you wanting to fight him, depending on the fact that he's actually got a player in his army as well. Because for me, the only other civilian in my country that isn't a villager commit tons of terrorism and was banned for 3 months, actually missing most of the history on the server. They did come back, and I kept telling Krolastan that this is the closest the server has come to a world war, and they acknowledged it. So over here, my cousin, well, my other cousin, not the cousin that owned the raiders, which is now the villagers, the one that was the civilian of my country, the other, her brother, who was the one who led the raiders, lost the war, surrendered, then evacuated to make another country over in that direction, or more that direction. So next, over here, she places some signs saying, Kyle, you better not invade Callum again, or it will start World War I. And he acknowledged that. So we all had a meeting. She was there as well. We all had a meeting up here. She was making noises standing there, and me and Kyle talking about how we're not going to start a world war, and we come to an agreement that he has to pay 2 shulkers for it. So he did. Although my cousin was standing there and she was just spinning around doing stuff. So we make an agreement. He gives us, and we're waiting here for him to give us 2 shulkers, and he gives us 2 shulkers that didn't have anything in them. So we demanded him to actually give us 2 shulkers that actually have money in them, because that's what the whole point was. So he eventually does that. And several times we did put a few troops into his country from a wee tunnel that used to be here, but as you can see, that's where it ended, but it was cut off. And then a few weeks later, he joins our military alliance on the server, and we have a good time on the server, being in an alliance. And then in the country's World War, where North Raiders, because in the second Raiders War that happened 2 days before the World War, where I won, I cut the Raiders in half. There was North Raiders and South Raiders. South Raiders was here, and it was like a puppet state of mine, and there was North Raiders, which weren't good. And obviously this puppet state was communism, because at the time I was also communism, or communist, and they were communist. So a war breaks out. They push up into the land I used to own here, miserably failing at that mostly, but they did get to there. But I pushed them back to around there. Krolastan left the alliance out of pure fear and not wanting to get involved in the war. Then realising that them invading up there was failing that they had to do that anyways. Bye.